They ignored national boundaries, much to the dismay of patriots. They ran refugee camps in France, but also supported displaced Germans in Russia. In Britain, the Quakers set up the Emergency Committee for the Assistance of Germans, Austrians, and Hungarians in Distress. That group, organized to aid enemy citizens detained when the war broke out, was led by close friends of Eddington's. This was seen as sympathy for the enemy by many people in Britain, and the Quakers were roundly criticized. It was even suggested that this violated the Treason Act of 1534. The Emergency Committee received death threats, and 3 of its members ended up in prison, including Eddington's friend and fellow Cambridge scientist Ernest B. Ludlam. The anger toward pacifists like Eddington was rooted in the idea that if someone was opposed to the war, they were necessarily supporting the aggression of Germany. The Friends moved to correct this. They were not pro-German by any means. They did not approve of German military aims, policies, or methods. Rather, they thought that inclusion and tolerance were more likely to end the war than violence. Building bridges with the enemy would, hopefully, give rise to a new internationalism that could prevent future wars. When an Allied astronomer imagined the militarized, dastardly Prussian scientist, he could hardly have done better than Fritz Haber. Haber wore his military uniform, complete with rank, to the laboratory every day. His face, sword-scarred from youthful dueling, always sported a cigar. He enjoyed being a commanding authority, and both scientific and military staff constantly followed him around. He was known for oscillating between manic activity and deep depression. Key to his success in chemistry was working closely with his wife, Clara Immerwahr. As was typical for scientific marriages of the time, she received little recognition. Their relationship was known to be a tense one. Much like Einstein, Haber grew up in his family's factories, in his case, dye and paint manufacture. His chemical expertise came early. He became fixated on nitrogen as a young man when he realized Europe's dependence on fertilizer. His breakthrough of ammonia synthesis was originally small-scale. Nonetheless, he was able to sell it to BASF in 1908 for 10% of the net profits and long-term research funding. Industrial production only began in 1913 with the help of the brilliant chemist Carl Bosch, who would later found and run the conglomerate IG Farben. That 10% share quickly made Haber famous and rich. Also like Einstein, Haber was born to a Jewish family. He converted to Christianity as an adult purely for professional and social reasons. It was very difficult for a Jew to secure academic positions. His son later speculated that Fritz's intense patriotism was a way of compensating for his Jewish origin. Even his colleagues were sometimes surprised by his uncritical acceptance of the state's wisdom. While solving the nitrate crisis for German munitions manufacturing and thus keeping his country in the war, Haber was already pondering what else his chemical expertise could offer the war effort. Most of the combatants had made minor efforts at using shells filled with tear gas. Haber's experiments found those to be nearly useless. He thought there was a better possibility: chlorine. Chlorine is a green-yellow gas at normal temperatures. When inhaled, it combines with moisture to form hydrochloric acid and begins burning the lungs. In sufficient quantity, it could easily incapacitate or kill. There was another feature of chlorine gas that made it appealing to Haber. They had an enormous amount of it. It was made as a byproduct of the synthetic dye industry that Germany dominated. Essentially, BASF and Bayer already had vast chlorine factories up and running. They had a great deal of experience producing, storing, transporting, and handling the gas. It was perfect. Haber had personal connections directly with the German General Staff and quickly received support. He suggested releasing the gas from massed cylinders to create a poisonous cloud, which would then, hopefully, drift towards enemy positions. Chlorine is heavier than air, so it would fill the trenches and force infantry out of their fortifications. The process of turning industrial waste into a weapon went fairly smoothly. Haber was assisted by Otto Hahn, who had returned from the front when his unit was so badly mauled that it was no longer an effective fighting force. They set up a test on April 2nd. It was so successful that Haber was slightly gassed himself. Over the next 2 weeks, more than 5,000 cylinders, each about the size of a person and weighing 200 pounds, were filled and hauled to the front. Then they waited for the wind to be right. Haber's invention was first used on the battlefield at the Ypres salient, where British troops had been dug in since